morning. Good morning. Psalm 55, if you guys would turn there. And I would, if you need a Bible, there should be some on the chairs in front of you. There's also a thing to take notes with on the seats in front of you, but I would encourage you, take notes. At the end of the message, as always, I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to ask you to share with those around you. What is one thing that you heard today that you want to apply to your life this week? We always want to move from our head, through our heart, to our hands, and apply it to our life. Kids, in your handout, we did something different today. We're trying something new, trying to see what works with you best. If you're here, or maybe and you're new here, you're a guest today, we have our kids inside with us by choice, by design. We believe that the discipleship of the family happens best when we worship and we gather together. So we do kids things on Wednesdays, we do other things, we have adults things, and sometimes Sunday school classes. We're off for the summer right now. But we believe our kids learn best with us. And so that makes this more of a living room than a laboratory, right? This is not a pristine, quiet place. This is a place with kids in it. But this is how the family gathers. And so, kids, for those of you that are old enough to read and listen and write and pay attention, I'm going to ask you 5 questions today, and your challenge is to answer them throughout the message. And then if you do that every week, at the end of next month, you can come see Mrs. Margaret Lukanen, and there will be some form of prizes. We haven't worked all that out, but there will be prizes in it. So you don't qualify, Chris. I'm sorry, buddy. I think he's over that kid range just based on tattooing, all right? All right. All of us have faced painful experiences of betrayal, right? We've had a friend or a family member or somebody that has hurt us. And sometimes, we've done the hurting. It isn't always intentional. It happens, right? It happens within the local church. But the question is, what do we do when we are hurt by others? And that's what this psalm is all about. And so I'll give you a kind of a title slide or a main idea slide today. Cast your burden on the Lord. Today, the psalmist invites us to take our pain to God in prayer and sing together corporately. That's the purpose of the Psalms, right? So that we encourage one another as a church. We just read Hebrews 10, right? Don't give up gathering, meeting together, that we can stir one another up, right? There is a corporateness to this. And the purpose of the Psalms was really corporate singing. So we're going to see that today. So Psalm 55, let me just read that title line. Let's talk about 3 things to get us started. So it says, to the choir master with stringed instruments, a maskil of David. So David is our author, which, you can kind of shoot in the dark at the Psalms and almost always hit something written by David. He wrote a good majority of them. So this is written by King David, our author today. He gives it to the choir master. So again, it's a reminder that this is a psalm that was written to be sung collectively or corporately in the gathering, right? Whether that be in the temple or in the church today. The psalms were written to be sung together. And that's going to play an important role in our psalm today because some of the language is a little misleading if we don't catch that. Now, type and tone. So this is both a psalm of lament and an imprecatory psalm. I'm going to categorize it as an imprecatory psalm, but there is a tone of lament. And so just by way of reminder, Psalm 71, we used this definition back a few weeks ago. Lament is an expression of deep grief or sorrow that focuses on God's faithfulness over our current worldly circumstances. It's a call to sing with others through our struggles, lifting up our voices collectively to God. So we did Psalm 71. I taught that one. It's a psalm of lament. Lament is a tone. It's a hurting. It's a grieving. This psalm today has some of that, but it's actually an imprecatory psalm. So let me give you the next slide. An imprecatory psalm calls on God to judge evil. Literally, an imprecation is a spoken curse. When the psalmist calls for judgment, it categorizes as an imprecatory psalm. This is a weird one for us because as modern-day Christians, at least in the Western world, we don't really ever find ourselves, or at least not often, calling for God to judge other people. That just feels foreign to us, right? Maybe in moments like if you're old enough to have lived through like 9/11, maybe you're like, God judged them for what they, maybe. It still feels weird. Like we lean heavily on grace and redemption. And if anything, if we're feeling Christian, if you will, we'll pray for their transformation, right? There are places in the Bible where men of God like King David, Moses, others, call for judgment on evil people. Now that may or may not apply today, but it is an imprecatory psalm. So, verse 1, let's read the whole stanza together. Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they drop trouble on me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. So this stanza begins with kind of setting the tone for the entire psalm. It gives us the requests up front, and then the reasons. The requests are, give ear to my prayer, hide not yourself from me. That's what he's asking God. And then the reasons, because of the noise, because of the oppression, they drop trouble on me, they bear a grudge against me. So this is how David sets us up for the day. He writes a psalm seeking God because others are speaking about, spreading rumors about, and causing the oppression and persecution of David. Others' words that are being spoken about David are causing him oppression. As they spread rumors, he is enduring the pain. Have you ever had others tell lies about you, spread rumors about you, hurt you by running you down to others that know you? That's where David is right now. David, as the king, has been in this position, and others are going around and undermining him behind him, trying to steal the kingdom from him. So let's break this down into some smaller parts. Verse 1, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not yourself from my plea for mercy. Attend to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan. So here's where I said that this can get a little tricky. So is this a prayer or is this a song? Well, by definition, the Psalms, the entire book, are written to be corporate songs. But in many of them, it speaks about prayer. So literally, it's a song about prayer. Does that make sense? Right? And so here's what he says, give ear to my prayer, O God, my plea for mercy. He's asking God he says, answer me, hear my complaint. He says, I moan. Right? And so it is a song to be sung by all of us that includes how we take our concerns to God in prayer. You with me? Let's look at the second half of that stanza. It says, because of the noise of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they drop trouble on me, and in anger they bear a grudge against me. So here's the reason or the theme today. Because of the noise of the enemy, the words that are being spoken, because of the oppression of the wicked, how those words are now affecting him. In anger, they bear a grudge. They are unwilling to fix this problem, to in a godly way resolve this. It says, these words are like rocks being dropped on the author. Right? He uses this vivid kind of language about being dropped on him. For they drop trouble on me. Like stones on my head, he's writing, are these words and the action, the implications of them and the problem. You know that many of the people, as I get to talk to a lot of the guests, a lot of those who come for the first or second time and visit generations, you know that many of them have not been in church for a while. Now, some move into the area and immediately are looking for a church. Others have been out of the church for a while, and they're like, okay, we had kids, so we want to get back into church, or I'm feeling drawn back to God or convicted, I want to go back to church, or whatever the conversation is. But of those people who have been out of the church for a season of time, many, let's say many, if not most, are for this reason, that they had these interpersonal problems with other people inside their local worship gathering, inside their local church, right? So today's psalm is really all about how not to let others draw you away from God, your faith, destroy your life, right? Let's read the next stanza, verse 4. Or at least the first half of it. My heart was in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. All right, kids, you should have answered the first two already, right? Okay, Levi said yes, so I know it's true. All right, here's number 3. I want you to hear the emotions expressed here. This is for all of us, but David gives us 5 or 6 emotions or experiences he's having due to this. Listen to him. Anguish, right? That's severe mental pain or suffering. Anguish is a strong word. Terror is like an extreme fear. Then he uses fear, which is, again, reemphasizing that. Trembling, he's having physical experiences because of the things he's suffering through. Horror, again, related to fear, but is this big word, right? Overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed is when a thing is too strong to control or overcome. He uses these things, this fear, this trembling, this horror, this overwhelming feeling because of what's going on in his life. Can you think of a time when you felt that way? I think we've all been there. What did you want to do when that happened? That's the question I want you to think of. If you can identify a time when you were experiencing something because of others, and maybe in the church, maybe in the family, maybe in the neighborhood, maybe at your workplace, whatever it might be, that whatever was going on was affecting you so badly, you were literally having physical experience in it. What did you want to do when that happened? Listen what the psalmist writes that he wants to do to get out of the pain that he's in. Verse 6. And I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. Selah, that word just means rest. Just like a pause right there. He says, I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. What does David write about that he wants to do in this moment? He wants to run away. Oh, that I had wings like a dove, and I would just fly away and be at peace. He wants to run from the situation. Now, he's not saying you should. He's not saying he did. He's saying internally, that's what I want. I want to run away. I want to escape this. Now, I've had this conversation. Some of you sitting here right now are thinking like, he's talking about our conversation. And I am, and in a way, but just know there's been a bunch of you were feeling that way. This is not one thing, right? The desire to run is common. The desire to avoid a problem is built in, right? Not many of us want to address the issue. The idea that I want to run away is so common. Let's reread that. Oh, and I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander away. I would lodge in the wilderness. Listen how far he wants to go. I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. So the first question is, does David actually tell us it's okay to run? No. He just identifies the desire. So the question is, well, why does he write that then? Because it's such a common feeling and desire that he writes this super relatable feeling that many of us, get, right? See, this is supposed to be a song sung corporately, right? This isn't about him and a particular person, although I'm guessing there's a particular person in mind when he writes it, or there's a particular experience. There's a couple in the life of David that stands out. One when his son was doing this, and one when another, like a counselor of his, did this to him. There's a couple of experiences that we read about in David's life that you could kind of connect to this, but he doesn't name them. The reason, we talked about this before, the reason there's no name, the reason there's no identify the experience is because this is supposed to be for us to sing. If this were about some certain person, we'd have a hard time connecting with it. But when it's, this is how I feel and all I want to do is run away, most of us can connect. And so this is written as a song for all of us to sing in this moment. Let's keep going, verse 9. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues. Or excuse me, destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues. For I see violence and strife in the city. So again, Psalm 55 is considered an imprecatory psalm. It's calling for judgment. It's like calling down a curse on the others. His first ask. David's first desire when praying to God and writing in his pain is to see those who are evil and hurting him be destroyed. Destroy, O Lord. If that doesn't work, divide their tongues. Right? He's got to be looking back to Genesis 10 and 11, the story of Peleg and the Tower of Babel, and the kind of the separation of people by language, the frustrating them, causing their language to be different and scattering them abroad. Right? He's got to be thinking back to that. He says, destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues, for I see violence and strife in the city. I love that I see this, right? So why does David ask for God to destroy? Because he views those who hurt him as evil. And also, honestly, as working against God, as sinning, as bringing sin into the relationship, into the community, into, for him, maybe even the kingdom. The problem is that the human solution to many of our problems for us is to destroy, right? We destroy marriages because we think they can't be fixed. We leave churches because relationships get challenged. We abandon friendships because we don't want to deal with the issue. We are more willing to destroy or divide rather than to trust God and to heal. I'll say that again. We are more willing to destroy or divide rather than trust God to heal. I want to make sure that point is really kind of embedded in this text. So, destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues. For I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls, and iniquity and trouble are within it. Ruin is in its midst. Oppression and fraud do not depart from its marketplace. He's saying, listen, the condition is bad. It's just time. Rain down fire, wipe them out, flood, do something. Because this is over with. But that's a human answer to this great big problem. That isn't necessarily God's answer. But David knows that. He's writing about his desire to run. He's writing honestly about his desire to see this destroyed, or at least divided. Let's see the answer in the next stanza, verse 12. Now, at some point, by the way, as you're reading through this, you've got to be like, why so serious, David? Like, you're really on one here, right? Like, this is not your normal, this something hurt me. Like, this is elevated. Like, why so big, right? And this is what we're going to find out. Verse 12, for it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It's not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. It gets worse. He says, we used to take sweet counsel together within God's house when we walked in the throng or within the community. Let death steal over them. Let them go down to Sheol alive. For evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart. So why is this psalm so heartbreaking and painful for the author? Because King David has been hurt by someone close to him who used to worship with him. Right? If we are living as a church community the way we are called to, if we're truly members belonging to one another as the New Testament portrays for us, then there's a level of vulnerability. There's sharing things that cause that when we're vulnerable, we're sharing things that we don't necessarily maybe want shared or used against us. And so that means what we do is we open up the opportunity within the room here, we open up the opportunity to feel extra hurt. Right now, some will immediately like build walls like, nope, not doing that. But then we're not living as God has taught us to live, right? We're not being the church that Jesus commissioned us to be. But when we do that, we put ourselves at risk. We can be hurt. We can be taken advantage of. We can be gossiped about. Oh, did you know? Right? And we're super hard about gossip around here. We talk about it a lot. I think it's overlooked in a lot of places. Scripture does not overlook it. But it's because of things like this. Because if you're sharing and vulnerable to me and I go over here, I've really done damage. And so David's being honest about it's not a stranger, it's not an enemy, it's not some dude from some other place. It's someone I love, someone I care about. We've worshiped God together over and over, it sounds like. I think of this, when I read through this, I think of a particular person in my life. And it was a painful friendship that ended. And it was really in the beginning, over a misunderstanding. That had this conversation happened back here, not find out about it years later. We could have solved it here easy, like over lunch. But instead, that got buried and harbored. And I didn't know about it until it started coming out years later. Then I lost a best friend, an elder in a former church of mine. Right? Like that's what I connect to when I read this here. What happens when or why church relationships are so challenging, right? But Jesus teaches us, he gives us kind of an outline on how to deal with that. We talk about this a lot here. Matthew 18 outlines that. If your brother has offended you, go to him, go one-on-one, have a conversation, right? Jesus' words, not mine. This is not 3 steps to solve a problem. This is Jesus' commands, teachings to us about how to solve relational issues. Go to your brother one-on-one. If that doesn't work, gather a couple others, right? And then go back. And then this small group of people should be able to discern who's right and wrong in here, right? And fix something. And if that doesn't work, and it kind of assumes you're in the right and the others agree with you, and you've gone to this person and they've rejected this, they don't want to change, they don't want to repent, whatever it might be, and if they're members of the same church with you, then you go to the whole church. And you let the church move and discipline in that area. But Jesus even breaks that. He doesn't give us a whole lot of step 1, 2, 3 kind of things, where here he does, because this is so important. It's so important that David is writing a psalm about this. While we're talking about Jesus, I want to look at this. I want to ask, how might Jesus have sang this psalm or this song? I want to hear these words and think about Jesus. Verse 12. For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It's not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. Maybe not equal. My companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together within God's house. We walked in the throng. How might this not only point us to Christ, but remind us, how would Jesus have sang this song? I did a little reading through the Gospel of Mark, and in the early chapters of Mark, there are 5 accounts where people betray Jesus, right? Kind of culminates with language like, and then they went and plotted how to destroy him, right? Then the back half of Mark, in the late chapters, right as he is going to the cross, there's 5 more accounts of betrayal. Things like Peter, his buddy that he's poured a lot of effort into, denying him 3 times in one night, on maybe Jesus' hardest night. And the betrayal by Judas, betrayed with a kiss of a good friend. Like Jesus could sing these words from his own time on earth in human flesh. But that's a part of the gospel. That if it was just God in heaven, Jesus, who forgives our sin or paid our debt or something where he's far removed, he wouldn't be relatable. So God became flesh. See, when sin entered into human history, it broke us, making it so that we could never repair the relationship on our own. And so God became flesh and lived among us, becoming truly human, while remaining truly God, a mystery in Christ. But as he spent those 30-some years on earth, and those 3 years in ministry, particularly we know stories of those 3 years in ministry, even in just the Gospel of Mark, of these 10 occasions where people that should have been trustworthy, who should have cared for him, actually betrayed him. And again, including Peter, who goes on to be amazing, but has some epic failures, and Judas, who betrays him to the religious. So the gospel message is one of Jesus not just dying for us, but also living for us. That Jesus has endured the gossip, the lies, the slander, the betrayal. He's endured all that and did it without sin. When we say that Christ imputes his righteousness to us, he takes those times where he overcame sin and we're living in that moment and he gives it to us. He deposits his righteousness in our account. Yes, he goes to the cross. Yes, he dies for our sin. Yes, he is laid in a tomb so that our sins can be forgiven. But he is resurrected to give us new life. But it's his life that he desires to give us. In Isaiah 52, it says this, or 53, excuse me. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. With his wounds we are healed. Out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteous. Listen to that. By him, the righteous one, he makes many to be accounted accounted righteous. He takes those moments when he endures what we do. Anything, we're talking about this betrayal idea today, but it could be anything. Our struggles with addiction, our dishonesty, our pride, or our this or our that. Any time when we've failed, he's lived through that moment or a moment similar where he has been victorious. And because he died to cover our sins and rose from the grave to give us new life, he gives us those victories. Our change comes from the gospel of Christ. Listen to that last line in that stanza before we move on, verse 15. Let death steal over them. Let them go down to Sheol alive. For evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart. There's that call for judgment again. David is outlining how we truly feel sometimes. We may not be, at least in our culture, we may not be that comfortable with praying, God, would you judge them? God, send them to death. God, send them to hell. We may not be comfortable with that, probably because we know how sinful we are. But David's just writing how we feel. He's writing about that desire to see judgment. Right? There's all those, as you're endlessly scrolling through social media, right? There's those things where somebody does something really dumb and then turns around and like falls down. And you get that instant kind of judgment and we all laugh. Like we think that way, right? He's just being honest about it. He's just saying, listen, I want them to be judged. Now this next stanza is super important for us today. Let's read through the whole stanza together. Verse 16. But I call to God and the Lord will save me. Listen, this is that pivot point in the passage with this big but at the beginning, like, but this, all this stuff before, but this. But I call to God and the Lord will save me. Verse 17, evening and morning and at noon, I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage. For many are arrayed against me. God will give ear and humble them, he who is enthroned from of old, because they do not change and do not fear God. There's three important things here. The voice changes. It goes from the psalmist talking to God, like in the second person, to the psalmist talking about God in the third person. Now I want to connect this. I want to keep us rooted in, and I've tried to do it this summer, is rooted in our singing. We were singing earlier as Alex was leading us through a song I really like in Psalm 8. Most of that song is directed to God, right? In all the earth you gave dominion. You crowned them, O God, with glory and honor, so we'll sing of your name, right? So we're kind of talking to God. But then the bridge moves. The earth is full of the glory of God. Come make much of the name above all names. Creation crying out, every knee bows. There's a time where songs that we sing together collectively in church, where we are singing to God, that's probably most of the time. But then there's times where we're actually singing to one another. We're singing words of edification to one another. We're lifting us up like, hey, like let's seek God together. Like, hey, let's overcome this with God together. Hey, God has been faithful to me. He'll be faithful to you. We call those songs of edification. Some are worship, some are praise, some are other things. There's a collection of things. The psalmist does that right here. But I call to God. Now, I'll just read this to you like I'm saying it to you. But I call to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon, I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. Right here, after expressing all this pain and what he really desires, I want to run away, I want him to be judged, I want him to be destroyed, I want this is what I want, but. And now he pauses, he kind of looks at us and says, but I call to God. And God hears me. The second thing is that this stanza does is it reminds us what God does in us. Verse 18, he redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. Sometimes in these moments, the first thing God must do is work in us. Now, when Jesus has these betrayals, the one thing we know about Jesus is not wrong. Jesus is sinless and they have sinned against him. But we don't always have that with us. If you sin against me, I may have some sin in it. I am imperfect. I'm sinful. I might have caused something. I might have started the whole thing. Sometimes it's good to just step back and see what God needs to do in me before he does in you. Maybe I'm innocent in this one. Maybe I'm not. The third thing is this stanza does, it reminds us what God does to them. God will give ear, verse 19, and humble them. He who is enthroned from of old, because they do not change and do not fear God. Reality is, if they're wrong and doing evil, God will judge them for their evil. Right, so there's three things. Let me read it to you again. Verse 16, let's just read through that. This is that big pivot point in the psalm. But I call to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan. He hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage. For many are arrayed against me. God will give ear and humble them, he who is enthroned from of old, because they do not change and do not fear God. The 3 points, it shifts to third person, reminding us that we are called to sing this together, to lift and edify one another up to God. The second one is the truth about us is we need God to redeem us as well. And the third thing is that if they are guilty, if they are sinful, that God will judge them. Next two verses. My companion stretched out his hand against his friends. He violated his covenant. His speech was smooth as butter, yet war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. So we've gotten through most of this psalm already. David has said what he really wants, how he really feels, what he would like to see happen, all these things, but I call out to God. But God hears me. But God must redeem me. God will judge them. But all of this, but the question is, has everything been fixed for David? Like, is all the pain gone magically now because he sang a song? No. In fact, this is possibly the strongest, most painful words written in this psalm. Listen, his speech was smooth as butter, yet war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. David is still in the pain. He's just changed how he's dealing with it. As he goes in this way here, admitting how he feels about it, admitting what he wants in his heart. He said the quiet things out loud. Like, he says the things we're thinking. But then as he shifts to this, he's still in pain, but he's giving this over to God. Verse 22. This is where we got our title for today. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. I would say this is the most important verse today. It gives us clear direction. It gives us an imperative or a command, right? Cast your burden on the Lord. So just in case we're hard-headed and we haven't picked it up yet, as we get to verse 22, David's like, I should just tell him, right? Cast your burden on the Lord, and there's a promise to it. He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. So what are the things that we might do? Like, what are the things that we shouldn't do? And I want to give you this one. Leviticus 19 says, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbors yourself. I'm the Lord. So we are not to take the vengeance ourselves. We're also not to bear a grudge. Right? So we should put out our effort to solve this, but maybe that's not doable. It sounds like David's kind of worked through this over time. Earlier, there was a verse that kind of points to the idea that they're unwilling to fix it anyhow. But he's not to take vengeance, and he is not to bear a grudge. So then what are we to do? 1 Peter 5 says this, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Humbling ourselves. And again, that might mean we are called to obey how Jesus has taught us to approach one another when there's an offense. Last verse today, verse 23. But you, O God, will cast them down into the pit of destruction. Men of blood and treachery shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. If the other person is truly guilty and we're in the clear, the promise it closes with is that God will judge them. We don't need to. We, like David, say to God, I will trust in you, Lord. I will trust in you. So what applications will you make today? Consider just who you might be within this. And so again, we're asking the question, what is one thing you heard today that you want to apply to your life this week? Here's some ideas for you. For myself, I want to grow in my understanding of singing for the edification of others. And I want to grow our church in our understanding of a variety of types of songs and worship. I want us to realize sometimes our words are directly going to God, and sometimes our words are going to lift others up. See, when God calls us or commands us to sing, he has a reason behind it. And so he teaches us why this is so important. That's why when people say, well, I just don't like that song, or I just wasn't in the mood, maybe this isn't about you. Maybe this is about you lifting up somebody else in the room. And maybe sometimes it's about you being lifted up. If you are mature in your faith, I would say this, you are to stand and sing words like these to others when they're hurting, leading the way for edification and comfort. Lift your voice about the truths of God so that other believers are encouraged to take their pain to God and trust in him. Sometimes your words help cause the lifting or changing or repairing of others. If you're new in your faith, you're encouraged to take all your pain to God and to others in the church without gossiping. We learn here that we are not to run, but rather to pray, to sing, and to trust God with the solutions, especially with the healing. If you're not yet a follower of Jesus, the gospel message is not one about some distant God who doesn't understand what it's like to be you. This is about a God who traveled so far to live in our flesh, to live our life, that he could identify with you, that he could hurt the way you hurt, that he could weep the way you weep, that he could feel what you feel, but do it without sin so that he could help us live new lives. If you've never heard about that Jesus, I would like to talk to you about that. Parents and kids, singing worship songs in the home together is a critical way to teach your families the role of worship in the church. Sing with your kids in the home. So what is something you heard today you want to apply to your life this week? Let's take a couple minutes, turn with some of the folks around you. If you are sitting around someone who's new here, would you make sure you include them, please? I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes.